When you think the stupidity peaked with someone trying to escape in a FedEx box, trust me, what's coming next makes that look like genius. 1. One inmate decided to escape prison using nothing but peanut butter. Yes, the same thing you smear on toast. He spread it over a cell door number to make it look like an exit and then asked a guard to kindly open it. And the guard actually did. For about 15 glorious minutes, this man was technically a free peanut butter-sponsored Houdini. Unfortunately, escaping into the prison yard is kind of like breaking out of your bedroom only to get trapped in your own closet. They caught him almost immediately. Moral of the story: if your great escape plan involves condiments, you're not an outlaw, you're a sandwich. 2. A group of Brazilian prisoners tried the oldest trick in the book, digging a tunnel. But here's the kicker: they didn't realize their tunnel led straight to the prison guard's break room. Imagine busting through the dirt expecting freedom, only to see Dave from night shift sipping coffee and eating donuts. The guards didn't even have to chase them. They just watched as 6 men popped out of the ground like malfunctioning moles in a carnival game. It's less Shawshank Redemption and more Looney Tunes meets construction fail. 3. In Germany, one guy thought, why spend years tunneling when you can just mail yourself out? So he stuffed himself into a giant box and had fellow inmates tape it shut. A courier picked it up and loaded it onto a truck. Brilliant. Except he forgot that packages get scanned. The guards opened the box, and surprise! There's a sweaty convict curled up like rejected IKEA furniture. He basically signed himself as returned to sender. 4. Inmate logic. If the guards can't see you, you're free. One man decided to hide in a laundry cart and wait to be wheeled outside. Problem is, laundry carts don't just roll past the gates unsupervised. When the guards started unloading sheets, they found a grown man underneath like a horrifying surprise inside a fabric Kinder Egg. Nothing screams mastermind like failing to realize that laundry doesn't walk itself out of prison. 5. One guy decided to disguise himself as a woman to stroll right past the guards. Wig, lipstick, dress, the whole 9 yards. Problem was, he forgot to change his voice. Nothing says totally believable like a 6-foot-tall lady with stubble and a baritone voice asking for directions to the parking lot. The guards weren't fooled, though I imagine some were briefly impressed with his contouring skills. If RuPaul's Drag Race had a prison edition, he'd still lose in the first round. 6. A man in France thought he could blend in with visitors by wearing a visitor's clothes. Except he didn't bother stealing an actual outfit. He just threw on a jacket and tried to walk out confidently. The only problem? He was still wearing prison slippers, the fashion statement equivalent of a neon sign flashing inmate. It's like trying to shoplift while wearing the store's security vest. 7. Some inmates in Mexico managed to get their hands on a rope made from bed sheets, tied it to the wall, and started climbing down. Classic move. Except the rope wasn't long enough. Halfway down the wall, they realized they'd basically just built the world's worst bungee cord. One guy broke his leg, another sprained his arm, and the rest gave up entirely. Who knew physics didn't take requests? 8. In England, 2 inmates stole a delivery van, planning to crash through the gates. Strong choice. Except they didn't realize the van had a GPS tracker. Authorities followed them like it was Uber Eats with criminals inside. Their getaway lasted exactly 35 minutes, which is roughly the same lifespan as a Taco Bell burrito in a college dorm. 9. A Brazilian prisoner thought outside the box, literally, by dressing up as his teenage daughter during visiting hours. Wig, clothes, even a silicone mask. For a brief moment, he fooled the guards and walked toward the exit. The problem? He forgot the final step, walking like a teenage girl instead of a 40-something man with prison muscles. His disguise unraveled instantly, making him the world's least convincing Disney princess. 10. One inmate in the US tried to cut through his cell bars with dental floss. Yes, dental floss. Somewhere between a Colgate commercial and a Looney Tunes gag, this man actually believed mint-flavored string could saw through steel. After weeks of furious flossing, he had nothing. Just clean teeth and carpal tunnel. Imagine explaining to your cellmate that your master plan was oral hygiene. 11. A man once tried to escape using helium balloons. His genius idea? Tie a bunch of balloons together, float over the wall like some discount Up cosplay, and disappear into the sky. The problem? Balloons are not NASA-approved aircraft. He floated about 5 feet before the whole thing collapsed, leaving him looking less like a daring escapee and more like a kid's birthday party gone horribly wrong. 12. A pair of inmates actually built a ladder out of cafeteria tables. That sounds creative until you realize cafeteria tables are heavy, squeaky, and not exactly inconspicuous. Guards spotted the operation before they even finished stacking. It wasn't a ladder, it was basically a live prison talent show titled Strongest Idiot Alive. 13. Some inmates decided to escape by staging a riot, thinking the chaos would cover their tracks. The problem? None of them planned where to go afterward. They got out of their cells, looked around the yard, and immediately froze like Sims characters with no pathfinding. Guards rounded them up while they were literally arguing about who should go first. Incredible teamwork, boys. 14. One prisoner tried hiding inside a trash bag. The logic was, trash leaves, I leave. Simple, except he forgot that trash bags get compacted. A guard noticed the bag was moving, and not in the rats got in way. They dragged him out before he could literally squish himself. It was less a breakout attempt and more a very dark PSA for waste management. 15. A man in Russia actually tunneled his way out, and for a moment, it worked. He reached daylight, freedom at last. Except he tunneled up right outside the prison walls, where guards were standing. He popped out like a groundhog on Groundhog Day and immediately saw his shadow, a bunch of rifles pointed at him. 6 more weeks of prison. 16. One guy figured he could just bribe the guards with pizza. Not money, not favors, pizza. And not even good pizza. Prison cafeteria pizza. The guards laughed, arrested him again, and confiscated the pizza. So, not only did he fail, but he lost his dinner too. Honestly, if you're betting your freedom on pepperoni, you deserve the extra time. 17. My favorite so far. An inmate tried to escape by painting himself green and hiding among the grass in the yard. His theory was simple. If I look like grass, I am grass. The guard spotted him immediately because, shockingly, human beings are not lawn ornaments. Imagine lying flat in neon green paint, praying nobody notices you breathing. Congratulations, you've officially become a failed attempt at camouflage that even Fortnite players would mock. 18. One group of inmates in Argentina tried to disguise themselves as sheep to sneak across farmland after escaping. Yes, grown men literally put on wool costumes and tried to graze their way to freedom. The problem is, sheep don't walk upright, wear sneakers, or smoke cigarettes, which kind of ruined the illusion. Farmers spotted the flock instantly because instead of bleeding, these geniuses were whispering arguments about which way to go. Imagine being so bad at disguise that even farm animals would file a complaint. They weren't fugitives. They were the world's worst county fair exhibit. 19. In Texas, 2 inmates attempted to flee using a makeshift zip line made from extension cords. They tied the cords to the roof and slid down, expecting to land in sweet liberty. Except the cords weren't designed for acrobatics. They snapped mid-air, sending both men crashing to the ground like budget Spider-Men. Guards didn't even need to chase them. They just walked over to the writhing heap of broken limbs. If you're going to rip off an action movie, at least check the weight limit first. 20. An Australian prisoner thought he could escape during a game of hide-and-seek in the yard. He found a perfect spot, the underside of a wheelbarrow. Brilliant, except guards noticed a pair of legs sticking out like cartoon chicken drumsticks. It's less Great Escape and more discount Looney Tunes gag. His hiding spot lasted about 2 minutes, proving once again that childhood games aren't an effective escape strategy unless you're playing them against actual children. 21. In Ohio, an inmate tried to dig out of his cell using only a spork. He chipped away for weeks, scraping concrete one miserable bite at a time. Eventually, he had a hole big enough to stick his head through, only to discover he'd been tunneling into a guard's office. There's poetic justice, and then there's literally sticking your face into the lap of the guy paid to keep you inside. Honestly, it's the prison version of digging to China and ending up in your neighbor's basement. 22. One guy thought he could trick guards into thinking he was dead by hiding inside a coffin during a prison funeral service. Yes, he basically applied for the role of corpse number 3 in the day's drama. He climbed in, laid still, and waited for his Oscar. Problem is, guards check coffins, because apparently this isn't the first time someone has tried Weekend at Bernie's in a prison. They opened the lid, found a sweating, blinking dead man, and dragged him out. His big performance ended with 0 applause and maximum humiliation. 23. A French inmate escaped by helicopter. Sounds cinematic, right? Except his wife hired the pilot, who immediately ratted them out. So when the helicopter swooped in, the guards were already waiting with rifles, ready to shoot down their mid-air Uber. The guy got about 30 seconds of adrenaline before being dragged back to his cell. Honestly, the only thing missing was a dramatic soundtrack and a director yelling, "Cut." 24. Inmates in Russia once tried breaking out by digging a tunnel and covering the hole with a carpet every night. Classic trick, until one day a guard noticed the tunnel cover didn't match the actual floor. Imagine camouflaging a hole with the world's most suspicious-looking rug, like some cartoon burglar logic. Guards lifted it up, saw the half-dug tunnel, and arrested everyone involved. Somewhere, Wile E. Coyote was clapping in approval. 25. An inmate in Brazil had family bring him a suitcase during visiting hours. The plan? Climb inside and be wheeled out like checked baggage. Except he underestimated how much space his body would take up. The guards noticed the suitcase weighed roughly the same as a human adult and was moving slightly. When they unzipped it, the guy spilled out like a jack-in-the-box of pure idiocy. His freedom lasted all of 10 seconds. 26. A convict in the US decided to fake an illness so he could be taken to the hospital and escape there. He moaned, he groaned, he coughed like he was auditioning for a tuberculosis documentary. They eventually sent him out, only to handcuff him to the hospital bed. He spent the entire night pretending to be unconscious, while nurses casually charted notes about his miraculous ability to roll his eyes at people. The escape attempt ended with nothing but an embarrassing medical bill. 27. Inmates once tried to escape by cutting through prison bars with smuggled hacksaws. They're genius. Move. They painted over the cuts with shoe polish to hide the damage. That worked fine, until the paint wore off. Guards came in one morning and saw half-sawed bars dangling like loose teeth. The prisoners didn't even get to test their handiwork. They just gave the guards an early preview of their unfinished arts and crafts project. 28. In Mexico, a man tried to flee in broad daylight dressed as a prison guard. He even had the fake badge and uniform. But his downfall? He didn't actually know any guard routines. He walked toward the gate, nodded like a boss, and then couldn't answer a single security question. It's basically like trying to sneak into Comic-Con without knowing who Spider-Man is. Instant failure, zero creativity. 29. A prisoner once attempted to hide in the ceiling duct and crawl his way out. The problem? Air ducts in real life are not Hollywood-sized tunnels. They're metal coffins. He got stuck halfway through, and guards found him wedged like a human Pop-Tart. It took hours to cut him out, making the entire prison aware that he'd just lost a fight with ventilation. You don't get less intimidating than being defeated by central air. 30. In Japan, a prisoner escaped through a tiny window by contorting his body like a circus performer. He actually made it out, but then tripped and injured himself immediately. Guards picked him up limping outside, less like an action hero and more like a yoga accident gone wrong. This wasn't an escape. It was a reminder that flexibility doesn't beat gravity. 31. One man tried hiding under a prison truck to sneak past the gates. He clung on for dear life as the vehicle rolled forward. But trucks have inspections, something he apparently forgot. Guards checked under the vehicle and found him dangling there like a failed Spider-Man stunt double. He didn't even get out of the parking lot. All that effort just to be discovered like a sad piñata. 32. A pair of prisoners tried to disguise themselves as construction workers, thinking nobody would question two guys casually strolling out with hard hats. The flaw: they didn't bring any tools. Guards immediately noticed two workers heading toward the exit, carrying absolutely nothing. They weren't construction crew. They were the world's least convincing village people tribute act. 33. In Brazil, an inmate attempted to saw through his cell bars using a stolen nail file. For months, he filed away, piece by piece, convinced he was making progress. When guards finally inspected the bars, they discovered he'd been filing the wrong side. He literally spent months carving decorative scratches into reinforced steel, achieving nothing but a beautiful prison-themed art project. 34. My personal favorite. A man in Venezuela tried escaping by painting himself white and posing as a wall. Yes, he stood still, pressed against the concrete, hoping the guards wouldn't notice that one wall suddenly had ears and a mustache. Spoiler, they noticed. Instead of freedom, he got laughed at so hard that even the guards had trouble writing the official report. He didn't break out, he broke into abstract performance art. 35. A Florida inmate tried to break out by stealing a guard's uniform. Bold move, except he forgot to take off his prison-issue shoes, which happened to be neon orange. Nothing screams definitely a corrections officer like wearing clown-colored Crocs while power walking toward the exit. The guards didn't even bother tackling him. They just laughed until he realized his disguise had the subtlety of a toddler in a Batman cape at a funeral. If you're going to impersonate someone, maybe don't accessorize like a traffic cone. 36. In Brazil, one inmate smuggled in a blow-up doll, dressed it in his uniform, and left it sitting in his bed to fool the guards during head count. A clever decoy, until one guard noticed the inmate hadn't blinked in 8 hours. They poked the dummy, it collapsed like a cheap pool toy, and the real inmate was found hiding under his own mattress. Imagine risking years of planning just to be undone by the fact that your cellmate looks like a beach accessory. 37. A British prisoner tried to stage his own escape during a fire drill, blending in with the evacuees. The problem? He got so excited, he bolted toward the gates before the guards finished counting. Nothing looks more suspicious than the one guy sprinting like Forrest Gump, while everyone else is casually strolling to the yard. He didn't make it out, but he did manage to become the only person in history to flunk walking in a straight line. 38. In Mexico, an inmate's girlfriend tried to sneak him out of prison in a pink suitcase after a conjugal visit. She wheeled it toward the exit, sweating and straining, as if she'd packed a small elephant. Guards opened the suitcase to find a fully grown man curled up inside like a failed Cirque du Soleil audition. And honestly, imagine that level of commitment. Stuffing yourself into luggage for love, only to end up in handcuffs anyway. That's not romance. That's chiropractic suicide. 39. A prisoner in Russia attempted to escape by climbing over the wall using a homemade hang glider. Built from bed sheets, wood, and pure delusion, the contraption actually got airborne for about 3 seconds. He sailed majestically, briefly living his Wright brothers fantasy before nosediving straight into the guard tower. If prison escapes were an Olympic sport, this one scored a perfect 10 in comedy but 0 in execution. 40. One inmate thought he could simply lose himself in paperwork by forging his own release documents. He typed up official-looking papers, slapped a fake signature on them, and handed them to the guards. The problem? He spelled his own name wrong. Twice. That's less a clever con and more a spelling bee meltdown with legal consequences. He didn't escape prison. He escaped literacy. 41. In Italy, a prisoner tried to cut through his bars with a smuggled chainsaw. Loud, obvious, roaring chainsaw. Guards didn't even rush to stop him. They stood outside his cell and watched like it was a live theater performance. After 10 minutes of screeching metal and 0 progress, the saw broke, and the man collapsed in exhaustion. Nothing says flawless plan like attempting a stealth escape with the single loudest tool in existence. 42. A Canadian inmate decided his best shot at freedom was disguising himself as a guard's mother. He wore a floral dress, carried a handbag, and even put on a wig. Not bad, except his beard stubble made him look less like mom and more like mom on steroids. Guards spotted him instantly, but to his credit, he probably would have won drag bingo night at the local pub. 43. Inmates in Venezuela once tried digging a tunnel using only spoons. After months of grueling work, they finally made it to the prison kitchen. Their big escape led directly to the one place guards are always standing around anyway. Imagine spending half a year digging through concrete only to pop up next to the coffee pot. That's not a breakout. It's a grand tour of poor planning. 44. A man in the US once tried hiding in a delivery truck full of bread. He tucked himself between the loaves, thinking he'd blend in. But the guards saw the bread sweating and fidgeting. They pulled him out, covered in crumbs, like a deranged human sandwich. It's the first time anyone has been caught loafing in the most literal sense possible. 45. An inmate in Spain tried escaping by tying bedsheets together and climbing out his window. It actually worked, until the last knot slipped, and he plummeted 3 stories into the courtyard, breaking both ankles. Guards didn't even have to chase him. They just followed the sound of screaming. Freedom was literally right there, but gravity had other plans. 46. Inmates in California once tried to escape by stealing a prison bus. Sounds smart, right? Except they drove it around the yard in circles, unable to find the exit. Guards just stood there watching as the bus full of convicts looped endlessly like the world's saddest parade. By the time they ran out of gas, they'd basically just given the guards a free comedy show. 47. In one of the most bizarre attempts, a prisoner tried to tunnel his way out of jail using a spoon stolen from the cafeteria. Again. But unlike earlier failures, this guy actually got close, only to emerge in the warden's garden. Imagine clawing through dirt for weeks, covered in sweat and blood, just to resurface under your boss's rose bushes. The guards didn't even need dogs. They had garden gnomes laughing at them. 48. A Brazilian gang tried using a fake wall to cover up their escape tunnel. They painted it, decorated it, even hung a poster on it. For a while, it worked, until a guard leaned against it and the whole thing collapsed like a cardboard set piece in a middle school play. The escape wasn't ruined by law enforcement. It was ruined by cheap set design. 49. A U.S. inmate tried to fake being unconscious so the guards would rush him to the hospital. He lay there, motionless, perfect performance, until his phone buzzed. Yes, he'd smuggled in a phone, and it rang loudly in his pocket while he was pretending to be dead. The guards laughed so hard they had to write, "Cause of death, T-Mobile." 50. One prisoner decided to train pigeons to smuggle in small tools for his escape. And for a while, it almost worked, until one pigeon got confused and delivered a hacksaw blade to a nearby bakery. The baker reported it, and the whole operation was busted. His brilliant scheme wasn't stopped by the guards, it was stopped by a bird with bad GPS. 51. And finally, the crown jewel. A man in Brazil tried to escape by dressing up as his own teenage daughter. Full wig, mask, outfit, the works. For a second, it almost worked, until he tried to walk out the door, visibly sweating, and guards noticed that this teen girl had the shoulders of the Rock. When they stopped him, he panicked and ripped the mask off in frustration, revealing himself like Scooby-Doo's villain of the week. It was the perfect ending. Months of planning, ruined because he forgot the one rule of disguise. If you look like a linebacker cosplaying Dora the Explorer, you're not fooling anyone. Hit like, smash subscribe, and stick around. Trust me, the next list is even dumber. Now the real question, which genius here deserves the gold medal in failure?